There she is.
Hello.
Hi,
Hi, hi,
how are
hi.
you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm quite excited to be here. Hope you are well too.
No, we're so excited to be here with you. And I'm in my gym gear, and I was like, I'm not even going to shower, straight from the gym into the conversation. Nolo, we're so excited that you've joined us. We've got people actually from all over the world who join on these sessions, and maybe, guys, it would be great just to let us know where you're joining from for now, so Nolo can really see that we're having a global conversation. But I was just saying, as you were joining, we're so excited and so grateful that you've made time for us tonight. The way Mentorship Monday works, Nolo, is that it's not me asking you questions. Really, it's the mentorship community. It's a whole lot of people who are interested in the area of expertise where you find yourself in, and they want to be mentored in that space. And so they send us questions. So I've got 4 pages of questions that, that have come in through for you. But before we get to the questions, I just want to let you know that we've got Legend says he's in the US, Chisa is in the US, someone says, hi, I'm in Philadelphia, Tapato says, hello from Harare, Candace says, hello from Madrid. So excited to hear. Is Potana is like, hi, don't forget we're in South Africa as well. Of course, we just want to say thank you guys to all of you for joining us today. And of course, the ones in the US, if you're on the right coast, we know it's morning for you. So thank you so much for making the time. No, before I get into the questions from everyone, how would you describe in a nutshell, if somebody said to you, describe in a minute your journey, especially your professional journey and how that's panned out, how would you compress that into a 1-minute description?
Sure. I think to be, and it's interesting because I always have these check-ins with myself. And I think that as a creative, I have done different phases of self-mining, what kind of creative I am, because I literally had no idea that my father was an artist as well. And I found that along the way. So I never understood where this magic of understanding this creative space came from. And I moved from doing, painting and photography in high school and going into the performing arts in varsity. And while I was at varsity, and at that time, I think I felt that it was a disadvantage because I had to pay for my own tuition, but I started working while I was studying. And little did I know that that was the added advantage for me, because I was able to then kind of migrate into and apply what was being taught on an academic level. So I was always exposed to the environment, and I was always searching, and I was always trying to redefine what that environment kind of created and what kind of opportunities that created. And that changed the voice that I grew into over the years. So I would say that as a creative, I've been refining my voice. I've been trying to figure out what makes me tick, what are the stories I want to tell, what am I interested in here in this creative space, So I would say that that's what every project has kind of done for me, whether it was in the performance space as an actor, or it was now moving into the production space. I was asking my questions around what kind of storyteller am I, and what kind of stories am I interested in being a part of, and where do I want to participate in this whole creative economy. So I think that's really been my journey, and I would say that's pretty much where I am and where I'm still trying to build myself from, actually.
What's fascinating is listening into how deeply reflective you are about your journey. And one of the things that we talk about a lot on Mentorship Monday is how to make the most of the now, that even as we dream about the next, to not discount the now. And it really sounds like in every milestone in your journey, you've stood still and you said, how do I make the now count? And what is the now here to teach me? and how do I take that into the next phase of my journey? And I mean, that's really, really fascinating. Tell us a little bit about Girl Next Door Media, and then we'll get into the questions. How was that birthed, and what was going on in your own conversation with yourself to kind of give you the green light to say, the time is now for this?
So I've always been, and this might not be the right term, but I've always been a bit of a serial entrepreneur. And that's, you know, a way of just kind of summarizing it. Because even during varsity, I started a production company with 10 of my peers at that time. And I think we were quite excited because we thought we had different offerings, and we were Black and female, and we wanted to champion a certain discourse and movement. And we obviously weren't business minded, you know, getting into a production, the 10 of us, and not really understanding how that whole entity would work. And that kind of fell apart. And then I got into another one with another friend. And, you know, and at that time we were interested in like history and what history really meant, and how do we create work that explores different elements of our own history, whether it's in content storytelling, whether it's in documentaries, whether it's with theater or animation. How do we make our history, first, how do we own our history in the content we create? You know, and that was a very fresh idea at that particular time. I was actually following the former president, Jacob Zuma, at that time, doing a documentary, which was fascinating. And I was in my 20s, and there was a lot of questions there was burning questions I wanted to answer. And that's what that production company was. But I realized as I was creating all these entities that a big part of me was fearful of creating my own. I always felt I needed to collaborate, collaborate in a sense that I needed to be in a company with people versus creating a creative economy, right? And that's really where, because I've always thought of myself as the girl next door. And, you know, I think when we think about the term girl next door, it's somebody who is approachable, who's familiar, who's dependable, you know. And I thought those were great qualities to kind of build on in terms of a premise, to create a sense of community within the industry, you know. So I was more interested in how can I create a community that people feel that they're a part of, that you can kind of bridge the gap between the people who are trying to get in with the people that are already on the inside. And that's really how Girl Next Door kind of came about. How do I create this sense of community? Let me be the one who just you know, explores what a girl next door, those qualities can kind of offer for people that think that the industry is for the selected, it's for the, you know, it's for a specific kind of person. So I wanted to demystify that. I wanted to basically say, no, actually, you can own your own story. You don't have to be anything outside than, you know, believing in the story that you want to tell. So that really was it. I've also been fortunate enough to always have some kind of person bridge where I was and where I wanted to be. So that for me was always a burning thing. How do I now create a company where I am doing that and creating those opportunities? So that's really how the whole company came about. And I thought, let me be a person that champions the bridging of, you know, people in development and people who are, you know, who are owning and thriving in the space.
Yeah, I love that analogy of being a bridge and of being an anchor within a community, and actually taking, you know, taking the way you feel around the way you show up in community as the girl next door, and actually bringing that to life. So, I mean, you've already started talking about creating that community, and I think it's not the first question, but I think it is probably top of mind for everyone. Hashtag open up the industry. I mean, this sounds like you've also been very conscious about that conversation. What has been your approach to that as young people continue to knock on the door of the industry, and yet you've also got tried and tested actors and actresses within the industry? How do you balance that as a person who owns and runs a production company?
So I think that we're living in very interesting content creating times, where in the last 3 years, we've seen an acceleration of where content creating, where that space and where that environment is. So, you know, I think after COVID, it kind of broke the walls of the people who study, the people who are in it. Now you have digital content, you have social media platforms, people are creating their own content on, you know, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, podcast. You know, I think it's literally changed how we access the creative industry. It's not about traditional broadcasting channels anymore, where we are all just, you know, queuing up at Mzansi, we're queuing up at SABC. I mean, obviously Netflix and the streaming has also changed the way we consume our content. So I always say that I think we're living in a state, in an era where it's actually become a lot easier to create your own opportunities to be a content creator. So, and what I mean by that is use what you have, use the platforms that you have to tell your story. Don't wait until you have to submit a proposal at an SABC, at Mzansi. Write your own shows, film them with your phones, create, you know, put your teams together, get like-minded creatives that are also interested in the energy of your ideas, and put that thing together so that it's easier, because it's changed even how broadcasters even engaging, because now they are like, okay, cool, you're young, you've never really done anything, you're not trained. But if you're saying, look, here's content I've created in my own, I've invested in my own ideas. I've put my own money, I've put my own time, and I've created a platform on a YouTube. This is how many people tune in. This is how I've invested my own. That's a different kind of currency and capital. And then you take that to the broadcaster, you take that to an advertiser and say, it works. There's an audience. People are interested in this content. And I think that's how for me, I feel the industry has kind of changed in that kind of way, because we're not anyone is a content creator. It's just the tools, understanding how to use those tools, understanding how to be a better storyteller. So I'm a big advocate of that, because I found myself, having gone to WITS, having gone to the National School of the Arts, having worked for production companies, questioning myself on how am I going to reinvent myself? How does experience, how does whatever networks I have still give me an added advantage to still be in a competitive environment where anyone else can create content and not have the same kind of institutional background that that would have given me an edge or an advantage before. So I think that's what's changed really. And I think it also, I found that it also encourages people to test their voice and test the kind of stories that they want to tell better, because then the stakes are between you and the actual content you're creating and whoever consumes it. It's not advertisers coming to say, well, this is not what we paid you for. So you have all that time to create and find your voice and find your tribe and find your people. So I think that it's really changed how we are creating and consuming content, actually, and how we are accessing this industry.
So I think that's excellent, because Togo_SA, I hope your question has been answered, because Togo was asking exactly the question, because she was framing it as, you know, how are you going to deal with the challenges of the streaming platforms and the digital platforms and so on. And what I'm hearing you saying is that actually this is a massive opportunity if you frame it correctly. But more importantly, by the time you come knocking on the door, make sure that you have something to show in terms of your own investment, your own time, and the ability to tell your own story. So I love the frame that you're putting on that. So let me stop being naughty and let me get to the questions, because I know we only have you until 7 South African time. So there's a question from Tlantla, and Tlantla is saying, Nolo, as someone who's transitioned from being an actress to a TV show producer, what really was the push for you to go behind the scenes? And what aspects of producing do you find most fulfilling when you compare that to your acting career?
Wow. So a lot of people don't really know that I started behind the scenes and then went into acting and then went back. So, but I will, the one thing that I always say that I feel lacks and we could always improve on is that as creatives, we are not interested in looking at that entire value chain of how what we do, how what we do exists into the entire value chain. So as actors, we are more precious about our craft, our performance, our instrument, how do we show up. We spend a lot of time refining that, building and working on it. But you will find those performers that want to write, that want to direct, that want to produce. But when I mean entire value chain, I'm talking about understanding the gatekeepers, how far your content travels down this entire value chain, who is responsible for making sure that you are on air, from who regulates, regulates the content to the broadcasting levels part of things. So I have found that the migrating between being a performer, in fact, I found that I was a production-friendly performer because I came from production. So when a producer came to me and said, Nolo, our schedule is falling apart. This actor is sick. Can we pick up 6 scenes that were scheduled, or 10 scenes that were scheduled for tomorrow? Instead of me saying, oh, but I need to prepare and my craft and my acting, I knew what that meant for the schedule. I knew what that meant for the budget. I had a great sense of the state. So it was easy for me to even come up with solutions as a performer to say, hey guys, I noticed that this actor is not here. I don't mind picking. So it became easier to become a very production friendly creative. So I've always felt that that's always been my strength coming into whatever production, because I know what it feels like to be an actor and understand the environment I need to thrive. And I also understand what production needs as well, So I think that has always been a currency of mine that I only realized as I was, moving into more and more into production, that there's actually value in understanding more than what you do. And it also creates a sense of ownership as well, because then you come in, you become solution driven, not looking just at what you are there to do, but understanding how it affects the whole entire project. So for me, that has always been a plus, migrating from that to production. So I think that, answering what has been the most valuable thing in the transition is understanding how important having a sense of ownership, the process of how you create. So when you give people space to actually create, so get the right team as a producer, get the right people, know the story, let that story keep you up at night, get the right people, trust them with it, and let them create so that they have a sense of ownership. Let them, have sleepless nights the way you are having sleepless nights about this project, because that's how people end up showing up a lot better and wanting this project to win, So for me, that was something I learned at, in this phase of my producing, that what I'm here to do is give the resources, get the right team, but help people help people get a sense of connection by creating an ownership kind of space. So that really for me changed how I show up in the work. I risk manage. I just make sure that we produce this the best way we know how, and not I'm doing it, but everybody is feeling collectively accountable for the project. So that really, really changed my process of being a creative.
I think that's really interesting to hear you say that, because on the one hand, the first point you speak about, understanding and appreciating the entire value chain. And I think a lot of people oftentimes just focus on their craft and their link in the chain. And it's so insightful to hear how understanding the entire value chain actually gives you greater leverage, because your decision making is also a whole lot more informed. because you know how things, the cause and effect of what happens lower down or up, you know, or up the value chain because of how you show up in that particular moment. I think that's really, really insightful. And as we're listening in, of course, how do you extrapolate that into other parts of your life for other people listening now, beyond just this conversation with Nolo, but in your space, and how do you, how would showing up fully in the value chain actually make you more valuable and a more valuable player in everything that you're doing? I want to pick up on a question from a different Ntlantla. The first one was from Ntlantla Mkhize. This one's Ntlantla Mushumu. All the Ntlantlas are coming out. Ntlantla saying, what are some of the big, Ntlantla calls it red tapes, and I would imagine Ntlantla is referring to the regulatory issues. You know, what are some of the big red tape that one should prepare for if they are entering the industry as a production company? Do you have some, can you shed some light on some of those regulatory issues, if there are any?
I mean, I'll speak broadly because I think there's different broadcasters now, you know, whether you're streaming or you're talking about the South African broadcaster or Mnet or whichever, wherever you want your content to lie. What I always say is that what a lot of storytellers or creatives get surprised by or prepared enough for is that all of the broadcasters know the audience that they want to reach out to. So you have a lot of people who are writing stories without thinking about who is the audience, who are the people on the other side. They all have their own mandates. And you find that a lot of people have concepts they pitch and repitch and pitch and repitch because they haven't taken the time to really understand, okay, this broadcaster, who are they trying to reach? Okay, cool. What are the stories they're looking for? Okay, cool. What is their plan for the content plan for the And the minute you start answering that, you're also able to align where your content will live, where it will have potential, where it will attract. It's already, you buy half into the conversation before you even start talking because you've kind of you've done the research, you know. And my first point of experiencing this was being in varsity, and varsity, especially at this, they taught you to really color outside the lines and interrogate and challenge and be academic about storytelling and concepts. And it all sounded great because it really shaped you as a creative. And then I went to work for this, you know, the SABC, and they have their own mandate. So every channel knows who they want to talk to. They know what kind of content they're looking for. And then that's the only time you are finding creatives saying, oh, wait, hang on, here's a brief. Now I have to write for this brief, you know? And I find that those are very unconscious red tapes that people run into. Concept for years. I don't know why they're not taking it. Are you talking to the right broadcaster? Are you sure that is the kind of content they're looking for? Have you done that research? Have you looked at, and I always say, know your audience. So instead of sometimes writing your show and then after that running and going to see who might bite, maybe have a look at the community, and community also being the broadcaster, not just the audience that is interested in this kind of storytelling, and then narrow them down and then start getting creative and then start thinking about how to kind of tell the stories that you want to tell, because then the chances of you speaking their language or speaking something they're interested in, you know, is better than you kind of shooting blanks. So I feel that those red tapes always help, because anything that is regulated, whether it's the Film and Publication Board, you know, that is information that you as a creator are able to empower yourself. This kind of content is for this kind of group. I'm trying to be edgy. Is this channel interested in this edgy kind of content? Are they interested in this kind of discourse or subject matter? You know, and that's really where I think, as somebody who is trying to get into the industry, don't take that process for granted. Don't look for broadcasters. Don't answer your audience after you've written the concept. I think get to understand the environment you want your content to otherwise it will continuously keep red taping you, because what ends up is that when you're in these presentations, that's when you're like, oh, they changed my concept, they like my character. It's because they know the kind of audience and you know, community or groups they're trying to reach and stuff. So I find that it's almost like an afterthought that happens with storytellers, that they think about this process after the fact.
I love the fact that you call it unconscious red tape, because I think it's, you know, it's one of the ways in which we get in our own way, because we haven't consciously applied ourselves to some of the unwritten rules of the industry that are, you're not going to find them listed on a website, but it's taken as a given that you have applied yourself to your target audience. And if you haven't, then you're probably standing in your own way. So I think that was a brilliant response, and I hope, Nhlanhla, you're happy with that answer. So I'm going to jump to Matsepo. Matsepo's question says, what inspired MKwaka? And what are the reasons, Nolo, why it's not on Netflix or Showmax already?
So MKwaka is produced by Rhythm World Productions. So I have worked for the executive producer. Well, he was my mentor since I was 19. So I have invested in a lot. He's invested in me quite a bit in my growth. And I think for the longest time, the reason why I stayed under his leadership was because I was very interested in his storytelling and his kind of storytelling. He's always interested in the Black experience. He was always interested in creating content where entire family can sit around the table and not feel uncomfortable and still be edgy and entertaining. And at that time, I don't think I was really interested in those ideas, being as young and being at Wits and, you know, thinking that I am happening and probably a lot more international than local, that I started being interested in my upbringing and where the richness of the stories that came from there. So most of the shows that have been produced under Rhythm World have really had that kind of storytelling where it explores the Black experience. What's interesting about MKwaka particularly is that we've set our own rules. So it is a religious kind of space, it's spiritual, you know, and it's two families that are interested in the legacy of the church that they've built, but and trying to figure out how their legacy you know, their legacy is parallel to their family and the dynamics that they end up encountering. So MKwaka came in a space because a lot of television shows don't want to touch any religious content. That, you know, it's a very safe place as well. So what I loved about this particular show is that we were creating a space where we wanted people to not judge, but to believe, to follow how a certain community of people govern themselves, how they believe, how they are interested in creating a sense of community around their spirituality and their legacy, and how that translated in what legacies they were leaving in their own families and stuff. So I thought it was a very interesting premise that you know, excited a lot of the audiences in the drama, because it was a drama before it became a telenovela. So I think that people saw it about 2 years ago. They were like, oh my God, this is fresh. What is this? Okay, cool, let's follow. And I think we are always very excited about the potential of this kind of world of story, because it doesn't really exist. That the religious group is something that's fictitious. So we're able to kind of stretch our minds around you know, very, I think, fundamental subject matters like belief and family and legacy, and still feel like we're not offending or trying to make judgment of how people invest in the things that they believe in. So for me, that's what makes this particular concept really, really, really exciting. So that's really how the MKwaka brand came about. It is a telenovela. People wanted to see more. And of course, our Black experience always had that supernatural aspect. People have always been interested in those kind of stories as well, how the two link, how the one forms the other. So we wanted to explore that, and we wanted to be brave about it in the stories that we create. We also wanted to create like love stories that were simple and unique and didn't have to lean on, you know, sexuality and overt and all the things that have become easier to kind of read intimacy. And so we found interesting ways to still tell thematic storylines, love and hate and jealousy, without having with an interesting background in a landscape. And I think that for me has always been the currency of MKwaka. It's because of this world of ours.
So as a follow-up question for Matsepo, but I'm going to paraphrase the question a little bit. Matsepo was asking, how much does it cost to create a show like MKwaka? And I thought it was a brilliant question because more broadly, how should you be thinking about the cost of production? What are the things that you need to take into consideration so that you're really going in with a realistic sense of the numbers it takes to do the kind of work that you do?
Sure. MKwaka, I think, is a very large scale show. So what I mean by that, it's a telenovela. It's on a big commercial broadcaster. So the budgets are obviously grand, and the reason why they need to be grand. So just a simple thing like we have a church. That means that you will need hundreds and hundreds of people every time you're shooting scenes where your global location is a church. So you can imagine how astronomical those costs are. That's wardrobe, that's how you feed them, it's how you travel them there, how, you know, the logistics. So it becomes a healthy budget. So the longer your production becomes, the bigger the budget. But with that said, then you would work on a 13-part drama as well, which has its own set of rules that aren't as, you know, on a large scale, but depending on the kind of story you're telling. So if you have an expensive world and your characters live in an LSM that's between 8 and 10 and it's glossy and it's glass and all kinds of things, when you think about a house, I've just recently shot a dramedy before working on MKwaka, and just to shoot at that house was, just to give you was nothing short of 120K a week, you know, and that's how expensive you need to kind of rent a property for a certain amount of time and use the electricity and station about 70 crew members to be on location, and the scale becomes bigger depending on the project. So I always say scripted content is the most, it's quite expensive in that way, because from the scripting pre-prod phase of things to delivery, it requires a large amount of team, a storytelling team, having to put writers in a room to create a show of 260 episodes is already an expense on its own, and there's about 6 to 10 writers in that room that you have to sustain for 6 to 8 months on its own before you hand over the script and give it to the producer to now put teams together that you have an HOD, you have about HODs that are about 10, 12. They have six people working under them. So the costs end up compounding in that way. And obviously, depending on your subject matter, your kind of storytelling and the broadcaster, those are the things that kind of inform your budget and what goes into your budget. And then you'll find something like reality, depending, and I mean, you'll have a reality show that has a much scaled down production crew where, you know, I myself as a producer can double up as a PM and double up as a coordinator. I can pretty much do the same job with 5 people, you know, and a very skeletal crew. And then I can spend a little bit more money in the locations and the traveling of getting the story in Eastern Cape. So you have to decide where you want to spend your money and where you're investing. But your story is everything. I think in the industry, we all say your story and your script is your Bible. It informs the time you will need, the money you will need, the team you will need, and then you work backwards. Where do I want to throw my eggs in? Is it in the visual language? Is it in the team? Is it in the locations? Is it, so you decide that, and obviously based on who's funding you, they kind of give you the brief of this is where we want you to throw, where we want our money to be spent.
I suppose, Nolo, a very quick follow-up question on that is, where do you find the money? Because I can imagine there are a lot of people who have, you know, ambitions to get into the industry and have, you know, media houses and production houses, but probably need a little bit of help in terms of capital to get started and capital to fund some of these projects. Where are the typical places where you would advise people to go to find the money?
Well, I definitely think that people should start the obvious places, which is the public sector supporting organizations that have literally put money for development. And I think up until I started really working with people who kind of made it their mission to make sure that they get money and money for development. So your NFVFs, your Gauteng Film and Commission, your Film and Publication Board, there's a number, there's KZN Film Commission. All of those funding, well, these organizations actually have funding for development. And I think there's a lot of people that think, oh no, but every time I go, you know, they've closed it. No, I have literally worked on about 3 or 4 projects where I've been funded through those channels. And I think it's really understanding what is required when you go there and tailor making your proposal to suit their requirements and making sure that they give you the money for development. So I would say exhaust those channels and know what channels are available where these organizations are concerned. And then, you know, I think, like I was saying earlier, it's just because of this content creating and consumption, our content consumption trends have changed. I think money can come from anywhere now. Mm-hmm. I think you can easily go into a company or a person that you know has that kind of capital and say, listen, this is the story that I'm trying to tell. I am trying to develop my own concept. This is how much, you know, I will need to go to do that. And I'm going to scale it down. I'm not thinking about hiring all these big cameras and hiring all these very expensive you know, experts and all kinds of things. I'm going to create my network of people that I already have. So I have a director, a seasoned director. I have this, because that actually translates as currency, by the way. I have literally walked into conversations to say, I do not have the capital, but I'm working with this person, I'm working with that person, and I'm working with this, and that creates its own currency. And then people are like, okay, cool. Your network of people seem like people I can bank on. So I'm actually going to give you that 50,000 just to even get into the room and start creating stories, and then come back and give me those scripts, and let's see how that 50,000 kind of stretched you somewhere. So I feel that we also have to look at our networks as currency. They are our development. How do you get people in a room to say, listen, I obviously don't have the money. You have this kind of, you know, you have the skill, you have this, you have that. How do we create currency by coming together in one room to develop this concept and take it elsewhere? I think a lot of us creatives want to wait until we have the money, and then only then can we start the development. But it is in the networks of people that you either studied with or people that you know are vibrating on the same energy as they are in terms of the kind of stories that you want to tell. So I would look at it that way, and then also just invest your own money. And by that I mean, you know, what immediate resources do you have to kind of start telling your own story? Do you have a smartphone? Do you have you know, these LED lights? Do you have a space you can create the content? Can you shoot a pilot so that I can see the idea, I can hear the idea, I can take that idea and take it to the person person who potentially has money, because pilots are very, very powerful in that way, because a lot of investors who are not in the industry don't really understand the language, but they want to see it. They want to hear the concept. So how much of your own investment and little money and little resources have you put to develop the concept so that you can go to somebody who is going to give you money for development? I think a lot of us are always trying to get money for the project, but not a lot of us are interested in finding money for the development. And take whatever you get, figure out how to make that stretch. Yeah.
Sure. I think that's a brilliant answer, and I really hope that those who are, feel that their greatest stumbling block or obstacle is the finances, that's where they're getting some input there. Dila's got a great question that I'm going to just take and skip the queue with. It's coming through online, saying, please give us some advice on trademarking of ideas, of stories and concepts. And that's the question. And I can imagine that as you're pitching, Nolo, there's always going to be that little thing at the back of your mind to say, am I pitching away my idea? Is this the last of it that I'm going, and the next thing I'm going to be seeing it on the big screen or the small screen without my name next to it or associated with it? So how do you pitch, but at the same time ensure that your ideas remain your own?
It's a very interesting topic that I actually I'm finding my voice in it, because I have recently, let me just say, I think that the biggest responsibility for a creative is to create work for yourself and others. So I've recently started meditating on the idea that being a creator essentially means you're an entrepreneur, because you're always creating work for yourself and creating opportunities for people. So instead of always looking at it like it's an art, it's also a way of creating an industry and opportunities for yourself. With that said, I then come from now a school of thought where I always say, don't be afraid of the ideas and don't be afraid of sharing ideas, because if essentially you are a creative, you should be able to consistently reinvent and keep creating ideas. And I think for the longest time, we were all just, always holding on to our concepts in the event that somebody might take them. And the truth of the matter is there's a lot of stories that if we all sat in a room, our stories resonate. That saying that there's not really new stories out there. It's really how you package them and all kinds of things. So I'm of the view now that if you feel very precious about your ideas, copyright them, use those channels. Don't take that for granted. Always, I've been in a lot of creative meetings where people send you, NDAs and memorandum of understanding and do all that stuff. If that's where you feel you want to play, you have every right to kind of explore that. But I've ever since I've changed the language of
I think Nolo's frozen. Or I'm frozen. I just need somebody to let us know. I am just checking in with Nolo once again. So I'm hoping that we're going to get her back in a second. I think she's just maybe having a little bit of a connection issue. But please just do let me know. Yeah, I think she's just jumped off. Koli, I saw your question. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I'm hoping that thanks so much. I'm hoping that Nolo is going to be able to join us. We've got just one or two questions before we wrap it up, and I want to talk a little bit about TEDx X conversation strategists. But let's see, I'm pretty sure she's going to join us again. So let's just see, the request is coming through. Well, that's not her. Admire, why are you sending us a thing to be on the live? We're not going to accept that. So we're just going to see if she's going to be able to join us. And I'm also very apologetic about the fact that I forgot to charge my phone. So we are like living on borrowed battery right now. And my cable's not close by. So I'm not seeing Nolo coming back on. I keep getting requests from everybody else except her. So let me use the time while we're waiting just to talk a little bit about July 31st. July 31st, in case you haven't seen it and you haven't been to the link on my bio, please, please, please do go. We are going to be hosting a live Mentorship Monday in Durban together with TEDx Durban, which is really, really exciting. We've got some incredible speakers. If you haven't seen the flyer, please go check out our page. If you're not following us, please follow me at The Real Nosy. And you will see that we have a really, really stellar lineup coming up on the 31st of July in Durban at the very, very exclusive Pencil Club. You want to be a part of that. Tickets are only 350 Rand. And let me tell you who's on the lineup. We've got Mbalin Tuli, we've got Rory Shabalala, we've got Tebchum Lawusi, we've got Chibet Chikumbu from Global Citizen. It's going to be absolutely incredible. We're going to be setting Durban alight. So I really hope that you have an opportunity to check out the link in the bio. If you are in Durban, get yourself a ticket. If you're not in Durban, I would fly out for this one. I think it's going to be absolutely incredible. And I see that Nolo's back. Let me just try and see if I can't get her back. And I'm going to accept there. Oh, there we are. Nolo, you're back.
I am. I don't know what happened. I apologize.
No worries. So we've got we've literally just got about just under 10 minutes left. So and I'm also I'm running out of battery, so I don't want us to end with a cut-off signal. So I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question.
Okay.
It's a question from Koli that's pinned, which I think is excellent, Nolo. Koli is saying, what kind of support and avenues are provided for actors or actresses to help take care of their mental health? For example, to be able to detach from the character or scenes so that we're not seeing incredible talent crumble. Your thoughts on that?
Sure, that's a very good question. I do think that there are obviously organizations that have now made it their business to look after actors better and to look after their process, their craft. You know, I think what I understand are doing very amazing work at actor spaces where they're looking at the holistic performer and creating tools and an environment for actors to also lean on one another and whatnot. But for the longest time, I think that has always been kind of left to the performer to kind of create their own space and environment to work, because as a performer, we're all different. We all kind of reach, we dig deep in different ways. We have our own instruments, we have our own tools. And I think that the kind of projects that we work on also inform how we detox and come on and detox and come on. I think if you're working in a theater space, you have a longer time to kind of invest a little bit more and kind of dig a little bit deeper. And once you let go, it's just this, you've invested so much of your being and spirit in this one particular text for so long that you almost need the same process to kind of unlearn and undo and whatnot. But I find that theater is a lot more sensitive with that process, because you spend a lot more time with the intimacy of performers and really digging deep and where you drawing from, where can we pull from to breathe life into this story that we want to tell. And that's a completely different environment that looks after those conversations with yourself, with the director, with your peers. You might even spend a whole month just kind of finding each other and finding your rhythm and synergy and the place that you guys will be operating from, versus a television and a telenovela where you are in a factory setting where it's really about get in, get out, get in, get out, get in. And the same process of also how you are digging in as well and finding the story and finding the emotions is also quite it's a different process, you know. So you have to now do, and this is really what I remember experiencing as a full-time performer. I needed to create ways and create a lifestyle around me that allowed me to detox. So I had to create my own environment. I wasn't kind of waiting for the production to do. The production wasn't necessarily interested. They wanted to know if I was okay and my well-being was fine and I was going to be able to meet the schedule. But I needed to start creating that environment. How do I switch off? Do I need to pick the places that I go to? Do I need to pick the kind of environment that I consistently keep around, the people that I keep around? You know, do I go to therapy? Okay, cool. Do I spend a lot more time with family? Do I thrive better when I'm in a community of more artists that, you know, we are familiar? Now I don't have to put a face. I don't have to do this because we're in the same business. Or do I disconnect and literally, you know, create a safety net where I'm always with people that I can trust, my family, intimacy? So I feel that it's a subjective to some extent answer that you have to kind of create that environment for yourself as a performer. Yeah. You need to know how important your mental health, your threshold is as a performer. You need to create your own tools to come in and out depending on the project you're being signed on. Is it a film? Can you take the whole day shooting a scene? Yes, you can. Great. That means I have time to play and I can really dig deep. If I'm on a telenovela, I don't really have time for that. I'm breaking down. I'm laughing in the next scene. I'm enraged in the next scene. How do I, when I know that I'm not going to be on set, look after myself? Because I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this. How do I make sure that I also empower them to know that I need an environment where I'm switching off. Yeah. I need an environment where I am not at work. So those things became a lot more deliberate the older I got, the more I got comfortable with the environment and understanding the industry now and how it operated and when I can be on, you know. So I think for me, it was something that I learned as I was growing into the industry. But I think that you need to create that community and environment of people that will look after these different aspects for yourself, and identifying who those people or those environments are.
I'm going to make sure we don't get jinxed, and I'm going to wrap it up here because I can see my battery is like literally on the thinnest thing ever. I want to say firstly a big bow down to you, Nolo. Thank you. You were phenomenal. You were, you know, absolutely insightful in what you shared. And I think this is why we come onto this platform, to learn from people who are doing and who are experts in their space and who are doing amazing things in their space. And it empowers all of us in the process. I think Nolo's frozen again, but a massive, 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 massive thank you to her. As I wrap it up, don't forget, check out the link in my bio. We're in Durban, 31st of July. It's a Monday because it's a Mentorship Monday and it's live. And it's at the Pencil Club and you do not want to miss it. And no, we're not going to be online on that day. You're not going to be able to join via Instagram. You're going to want to be there. You're going to want to be there. All right, tickets are $350 and it's going to be a phenomenal, phenomenal experience. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining and have a very, very amazing, amazing evening and an amazing week ahead. Take care and cheers.